You know what? You know what? I came here for beauty. I came here to be an audiophile, to listen to sound that moves me, that's beautiful. That's what I got. That's what I get. That's what I'm searching for. And when I find it, when I find components that do that, it's really, really exciting. Now, today's products actually do three, and it's from a company called Lab 12. The company is 10 years old. They were founded in Athens, Greece. They're still there. They're still designing and building their products in Greece, and they rely on Greek vendors for many of their parts for their products. But I came here for beauty because when I listen to tube electronics, I want that. Some version of that, right? I want music to sound beautiful. Less concerned, to be blunt about it, with accuracy or neutrality. I like that too. I like having both, tubes and solid state. But when I listen to tubes, I want tubes to sound beautiful, tonally rich, satisfying, in images that are fully developed, that have dimensionality to them. And that's what I got. Now I started listening first with their power amplifier, which is called the Mighty. It's their smallest amp, their most affordable amp. And I hooked it up to the Klipsch Cornwall 4s, and I was knocked out by what I heard. Because that's what I got. I got beauty, I got tone, I got dimensionality. Voices sound like human beings, instruments sounded like themselves, and I knew I was on to something good. And speaking of something good, yes, there will be an Audiophiliac viewer system of the day later on in the show. But back to Lab 12. So I got the power amp was the Mighty, the preamp is the Pre-1, and the passive preamp that I also tried is called the True. Very basic look, but the build quality and the knob feel, by the way, on the preamp and the passive is very silky smooth, really nicely done. But the basic look is very basic. You know, there's not a lot of filigree there, and I love that the preamplifier is just a preamplifier. It has two 6922 tubes, but it's not also a DAC, and it's not also a phono preamp. It doesn't do fancy stuff. No, it just is an analog through and through preamplifier. The pot is an actual potentiometer. It's not a relay for controlling something else. No, it is a real pot. It does have a remote control. Oh, the remote control for the preamp is kind of funny. It's really tiny. It's very plastic. I think the volume up-down buttons and the input selector buttons are too close to each other, but it gets the job done. So I'm just going to dive a little deeper into the preamp, the Pre-1. It is available, by the way, in silver or black. It has 5 line-level inputs, RCA outputs, and also XLR outputs, but it's not a balanced design. Those XLR outputs are there for convenience if you're going to use it with an amplifier that has XLR inputs. But anyway, it's not a balanced design. It uses two 6922. The build quality feels very, very solid. It runs kind of warm to the touch. The preamp is a zero feedback design. One thing you notice right away when you start to listen to this preamp and use it, it has a lot of gain. It has 20 dB of gain, which is about double what you'd find in most preamplifiers. Meaning to achieve a given volume level with a power amplifier, you're going to have a lower volume setting with the Pre-1. So if you guys like that thing, I just barely cracked open the volume and it was really loud, you'll like this preamp. I want it to be a little more room there on the bottom end of the range, but it is what it is. It has a lot of gain. And the output impedance of the preamp, which is not that unusual for two preamps, is on the high side. It's 900 ohms, but I didn't feel that that was an issue with any of the amplifiers I used over the course of this review. The power amp, the Mighty power amp, uses, it's a tube design. It uses 6N1P input tubes, and the stock tube is an EL34. Just a great sounding tube. It's hard to go wrong with an amp that uses EL34s, but you could also fit the Mighty with KT88s or 6550s for a bit more power. The power, by the way, is, remember, it's a single-ended amp, is 10 watts per channel when run ultra linear. There's a switch right behind each tube. So you can run it ultra linear for a little higher power, 10 watts, and if you switch over to triode, it's 6 watts per channel. But it definitely feels more powerful than those numbers would indicate. Now round back, there's output taps for 4 ohm and 8 ohm speakers, and regardless of whatever ohm impedance your speaker is, you should always try listening with both. With any tube amplifier that has output taps, I mean, you have a choice of 4 ohm output or 8 ohm output. Don't worry about what your speaker says it is. Try it both ways. Easy enough to switch, and you will learn quickly which output tap is the correct one for your speakers. Oh, and here's a weird thing though. The power amplifier and the preamplifier, they're tube designs. The power switch is on the rear panel. That's weird, because you're not going to leave these on all the time. Definitely not going to leave these on 24 hours a day. So you got to do a little reach around and to get to the switch and turn them off. You know, they're not very big. I didn't find that to be a hassle at all. It's just unusual to see a tube amplifier where you can't turn it off from the remote. You have to do the reach around to turn these puppies off. One thing that I was truly surprised about with this design was it doesn't have auto bias for the power tubes. It is fixed bias. And I asked why, because it seems like that's a pretty common feature on tube amplifiers, so that whatever tube you in, it automatically biases the tube. Not so here, and I asked Stratos Vihos, the designer and owner of Lab 12, why did you do that? And his answer was, as we spoke, I said, oh yeah, this is that kind of guy. He says, because it sounds better that way. If you use auto bias, you do forfeit some of the potential sound quality of a design. It's a simpler circuit, to put it another way, and he wants to go for the simpler and best sounding way. So it's not auto bias, and he doesn't think that's a big deal, especially because it's a single-ended amplifier. You don't have to balance the output tubes on a given channel to each other. So anyway, that's what Stratos says, and I kind of believe him because, again, it does, yeah, it's a very tubey sounding amplifier. Oh, as for those meters on the front panel, they're VU meters, not power output meters. They're actually measuring the voltage coming into the amplifier, not how much power is coming out of the amplifier. I think that's kind of weird, but they look cool. I mean, the meters on any amp are not really there for any true function other than to dance around a little bit. But anyway, they are VU meters, not power meters. And another interesting tidbit about these designs is they all have, including the passive, they come with a 5-year warranty. 5-year warranties in tube amplifiers are pretty rare. So anyway, it's nice to see that Lab 12 stands behind their products for 5 years. I know that some of you are wondering, so Steve, come on, what is the price? Well, okay, the power amplifier, the mighty power amplifier, is $2,190 in the US, and that's the same price for the Lab 12 Pre-1 preamplifier, and that is also $2,190. The passive preamp, the True, is $690. So these, mind you, these are the least expensive electronics sold by Lab 12. But I was curious how that little amplifier, the Mighty, with 10 watts per channel in ultralinear, how that would handle a medium to lowish sensitivity speaker. So I hooked up the KEF LS50 Metas, which are 85 dB sensitivity, which is definitely on the lower side, right? Definitely not a horn speaker. And you know what? It sounded really good. I mean, all the things that are good about the LS50 Meta were shining, like bursting through these speakers because of that way it just creates these incredible sound stages. I mean, it's so there, it's so believable, it's so tactile, palpable, and it has body and soul to it. Now mind you, these speakers can sound, depending on room placement and other things going on, they're not always the fullest and richest sounding speakers, but here with the Mighty, they were. And they played reasonably loud. I was definitely in the high 80 dB range on average. That's plenty loud. I didn't feel that the amp was struggling to drive the speaker. Now, I wasn't playing, head-banging music no, I wasn't doing that, but in terms of just general music, jazz, rock, here and there, it sounded fine. It did not sound underpowered. So if you're not into the loud playback thing, you should consider going with lower powered amplifiers, because dollar for dollar, I'm going to make a broad generalization here, dollar for dollar, lower powered amplifiers tend to sound better than higher powered amplifiers of the same price. It's a simpler circuit. There's less that can go wrong with a lower powered amplifiers. I'm sure I'm going to hear about this in the comments. By the way, please comment. If you have any experience with Lab 12, I'd love to hear from you guys. And if you've heard it at shows or whatever, and you have a dealer that sells it, speak up, please. You guys are a little holding back lately in the comments section, so I want to hear more from you. Anyway, back to the Lab 12. Yeah, so I started my listening sessions with just the Lab 12 power amplifier, not listening to the preamp or the passive. The power amp was the part that fascinated me the most. I mean, yeah, I am kind of a sucker for meters, even if they're not power meters, but it's just, this is the essence of the sound was coming from that amplifier. So, I've been in this Creedence Clearwater mode lately, and much more with their live records than their studio records. The studio records sound too clean, too perfect. They don't open up enough, but the live records are just the opposite. They're rougher, but the rhythm section really chugs along. They just kick ass. So I'm playing the vinyl. I have it on CD. I have an SA CD actually, but I'm playing the vinyl with the Grado Epoch 3, which, if anything, only intents the rockish aspects of this recording. It's just alive. It's just screaming out of the speakers, even with 10 watts driving with the little Mighty. Actually, I think I was switched over to triodes. I was down to 6 watts and still no problem pushing these speakers around, because they are, after all, very high sensitivity speakers. I think 102 dB, so way more sensitive than the LS50 Metas. So up to this point, I was using a pass preamp, but I decided before I get to the Lab 12 preamplifier, I wanted to try the passive. And by the way, no problem with not having enough gain, because the passive, after all, has 0 gain, no gain at all, because it's you don't plug it into the wall. And even there, I was never going past like 1 or 2 o'clock on the volume control. So anyway, so I'm using the passive, and the thing is, the passive is very sweet sounding. It's very low fatigue sounding. It's very gentle on my mind, and I liked it. And it was obviously really quiet and all that. But I don't know, I wasn't connecting with the sound as much. It felt, well, a little restrained, a little soft, too soft. So I popped out the passive and I put in the Lab 12 Pre-1, the active preamp. And everything just popped into focus and livened up. The sound just got more intense. I'm still listening to the Creedence, of various Creedence records at this point. And yeah, with the active preamp in there, yeah, Creedence was more Creedence driven with an active preamp, and the Mighty. Next up, I compared the Mighty with a solid-state amplifier, a low-power solid-state amplifier, specifically the 1st Watt F7. And recording I selected was this one, Jim Morrison / The Doors' American Prayer. Now, this record was basically put together after Jim Morrison had passed away, and it's basically him reading his poetry, and then the Doors added music after the fact. And first of all, to hear Jim Morrison so naked, so his voice just not with a lot of music going on around him, was really good. I mean, he was so present, so immediate, so alive sounding with the Mighty. And switching over to the F7, less so. The soundstage dimensions were smaller with the 1st Watt F7. Going back to the Mighty, it opened up more. The music breathed more with the Mighty than it did with the 1st Watt F7. Now, the thing about the F7 is it is a more powerful amp, and when I played music loud, really loud, I felt the difference between the 10 watts and the 20 watts. Yeah, when you really start to crank it, you feel the limitations. It's not like the Mighty ran out of juice. It ran out of dynamics and life compared to the F7. So one other very important observation is I could listen to the Lab 12 preamp and power amp combination driving the Klipsch Cornwall 4s very, very quietly, late at night. I didn't want to disturb my neighbors or my wife, and I didn't feel like I wanted to turn it up. I needed to turn it up to feel more energy from the music. Even played super quietly, the Lab 12s really delivered the goods. And one recording I was playing for this at night and also the next morning, I played Niels Fromm's solo piano recording, which is a very, very, very close mic'd recording. You hear every little shift in the music. It's right there. The mics are on top of the strings, or it feels that way. Man, oh man, the combination of the Lab 12 with the Cornwall 4s playing Niels Fromm, it was like listening from inside the piano. Now, I did mention before, I think I have, that I spent a year of my life in the 80s studying piano tuning. Now, it didn't work out. I wasn't very good at it, but I learned a lot about the sound of pianos, especially from inside the piano, because I spent a lot of time inside pianos, tuning them and working on them. So hearing these Niels Fromm recordings was a special treat for me, because it kind of brought me back to that up-close sound of pianos. So anyway, I think that's it. So we are now moving on to, so Steve, what do you really think of Lab 12? The Pre-1 preamp, the mighty power amplifier, and the true passive preamp. You know, it was just one of those things. They hit me hard because I felt that they gave so much for the money in terms of delivering beauty from the sound of recordings. Like I said up front, I came here for beauty. I came here to listen to music, not to analyze it, not to scrutinize it, not to see how perfect it sounds. No, does the music touch me? That's what I want, and I think that's what the Lab 12 gear absolutely does. But as for which one to start with, well, it would depend on your system and where you're headed. So I think both the Pre-1 preamplifier and the mighty power amp, either way would work. But if you said, Steve, which one would you choose? What would I choose? I would choose the mighty. I think the mighty is so enjoyable, just a blast to listen to. As for the passive preamps are tough to nail down because it depends on everything else in the system, the sensitivity of the speakers, and everything makes a difference. So it's hard to lay down any generalities other than to say, well, it's passive. It's very quiet because it doesn't have any gain. It also doesn't have a remote control. I should have mentioned that earlier. So that's a very use-specific type of component where it would fit perfectly in some systems, but not in most. I'm talking about the passive preamp. So yeah, I liked it. Anyway, we are now up to, yeah, absolutely, positively, right now, the Audiophiliac viewer system of the day. Hey, this one comes from George. He lives in Scotland. He is 60 years old. He used to sell hi-fi back in the early 80s, and it was always fun, says George. Anyway, as for his system, he has two sets of speakers there, the big ones. The Tannoy D700s are from 1993, and he has recapped them himself. The other big speakers are the Monitor Audio Silver 500s. Great sound for the money, says George. And as for subs, he has two there, big ones, Yamaha 901s, each one driven by a 700-watt amp. Speaking of amps, there's a Denon PMA 2500 NE integrated, and also a Denon X 6500 that he uses as a surround amplifier. For SACD, he's using a Marantz 30N. He also has two subs in the rear of the room. Oh, by the way, yeah, he has two subs in the rear of the room by KRK. For vinyl, he's spinning a Project Carbon turntable. There's also a Mac Mini in there to serve Tidal. Thanks, George. All right, we are back, and my name is Steve Guttenberg, and I am the Audiophiliac. Thank you so much for watching. I say that a lot, but you know what? I really mean it. Without you guys out there watching from all over the world, from Lithuania and Puerto Rico and the United States and England and Australia and Germany and a couple in Japan, I'd be talking to myself. So I'm so glad you're out there. But if you'd like to help the channel, the best thing to do is to join my Patreon. Super easy to do. There's the link to it. Well, there's the address right there on the screen right now. And you can join for a few bucks a month, up to $50 a month. And if you join for $50 a month, you get to talk to me on the phone 15 minutes every month at the beginning of the month. And I thoroughly enjoy these conversations with my patrons. I learn a lot from them. I hope I help them. But it's nice to talk to the people out there watching the videos. You could, of course, subscribe if you have yet to subscribe. And please hit that like button. I don't stress that. I should say that in the front. But anyway, if you like what I'm doing here on the channel, please hit the like button. It means a lot to it means a lot to me because it means a lot to the YouTube algorithm. All right, I think we're good now. My name again is Steve Guttenberg, and I am the Audiophiliac. I hope you come back for more real soon. Bye-bye.